We're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Jillian Burgos. I'm the Assistant Deputy Director of the Office of Environmental Equity at the Department of Toxic Substance Control. A very long time. Hope everyone wrote it down. We're here to discuss the draft framework for the Environmental Justice Advisory Council. And are in the beginning stages of forming the council. We really appreciate all of you guys joining and helping us deliver. You'll also hear it called EJAC, just acronym terms, a little bit acronym. And we are currently in the public comment period, which started May 15th and is ending August 25th. So you can give us your comment here, but you can also give us a comment via email. Right? Yeah. Or all the verbal comments. We encourage you to provide feedback, and the opportunity to do so will be after the presentation. This meeting is being recorded. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted online on our website. Thank you. Now, just to go over the meeting agenda a little bit, we'll have the presentation of the draft framework by Diana, our Deputy Director of the Office of Legislation and Regulatory Review, and also the board member, Mr. Jack Gomez, of the Board of Environmental Safety. After, we'll open up for your feedback. I'll be facilitating that portion of the workshop. And then after that, we will have closing statements from Diana. And for any questions from the media, if we have any media folks here, you would want to contact Devin Hutchinson. We also have our Deputy Director of Communication by the Office of Talk. There you go. She's here today in person. And that is it. So I'll hand it over to Diana.
Thank you. Okay. Given that we have a small group, I think it will be good for us to do introductions, especially because typically we'll have an in-person and virtual option. We don't have a virtual option because we've been having a couple of virtual meetings already. I think that in-person is something that we want to do. So I do want to take the time to actually just go around and do quick introductions. And I'll start with myself and I'll pass it on to my co-facilitator who's going to be introducing himself. And we'll just go around the room, just do your name information. Also to a little bit that Jillian also mentioned, if you need help with translation and interpretation, we have individuals. And with that, my name is Hannah Russell-Whitestills, like Jillian mentioned. I'm the Alleged Director for the Department of Substance Control, based in Sacramento, but originally born and raised here and spent in the Valley in the area, which is in the heat. So it's hot and good. It's 109 in Sacramento. So this is a little bit more. With that, I'll pass it on to Richard.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I just landed from San Diego. My name is Richard Gomez. I am a board member of the Board of Environmental Safety. Thank you all for being here.
Hello, my name is Edgar. I'm a member of the Clean Air Coalition. That's a coalition to protect our community and our community surrounding the facility of Mexico, a city of industry.
And Vivian Sacramento, Clean Air Coalition.
Rebecca Overmeyer Velasquez with the Clean Air Coalition from Whittier and Avocado Heights. And yes, we're working on code, which is not what we go back. Melissa Manukian, also with the Clean Air Coalition.
My name is Jack Brady, also with Clean Air Coalition. Andrew Diaz, Clean Air Coalition.
Andres Alaka, Clean Air Coalition. Max Gabalden, Clean Air Coalition, nearby resident of Ecobat.
This is Liz from the Resurrection Parish. Marcus Cisneros, resident of Blue Heights, over 60 years. I am a member of the Resurrection Committee here.
Hi, my name is Edna, and I am a resident here in Boyle Heights, and I also am a member here of the Resurrection Parish.
My name is Olivia Ochoa, and I'm a resident here for about 60 years also. And I'm a member of the Resurrection Community.
Hi, my name is Ned Sandoval. I'm here on behalf of Tetra Tech, and I'm also from DTSC.
I'm Mike Montana with EJAC. John Holloway, on behalf of the County of Los Angeles.
John Torres with the County of Los Angeles. I'm Jeremy Luchin with your Newly Associates.
Daniel Talamantes, research out of, thank you.
Hi, I'm Christine Montes, Department of Public Health, Environmental Health Division. Good afternoon, Nina Rodriguez, the Department of Public Health, Office of Environmental Justice and Clinical.
David. In my prior life, I was engineering journalist in the quality work for 21 years. And before that, 10 years in consulting. So after retirement in 2020 November, I opened up a small startup, right? Oversight in New LLC, and I want to check out what the board. I wanted to know.
Hi, Dion Bob, Energy, Public Participation in the Next Step Project. Ellie Westphal, Deputy Director of Communications at DTSC. Okay. I think we got everybody, so thank you. Okay. So we go into the next slide. We'll go through quick meeting objectives for the next hour or so. Really, this meeting is for us to go through the framework, provide a little bit of context, but really provide a sense of clarifications for folks that need a little bit of clarification, any questions, and also, like Jillian mentioned, any comments that you guys want to provide for us. It can be verbal comments or it can be written comments, just depending. I know we have received a couple of written comments from individuals in this room already, so thank you for that. Really, the purpose is for us to go into a little bit more finalizing the framework. And then we'll go into why we're here in just a few minutes. But at least for us, we have August 25th is the last day for us to receive comments so we can finalize the framework, update the framework based on people's comments, inputs, and just different ideas that they have provided. In addition to that, once we finalize the framework, we're actually going to go out and look for possible individuals to attend or actually be part of the Environmental Justice Advisory Council. That is really the main objective of is a framework is something that we want to actually finalize. Do we want to actually get individuals to apply? And then two, really is getting this Environmental Justice Advisory Council up and running so we can actually start working with the EJAC project. Okay, so with that, we'll go into a little bit more of the background. So for the folks that weren't aware, the department went through huge governance and fiscal reform in 2021, specifically June of 2021. There was a reform effort specifically looking at the programmatic changes. We understand there's a lot of individuals in this room that has been, they've been advocating and really changing the way we operate. And that can be the way we look at cleanups, the way we look at programmatic functions, specifically how we issue permits, when permits are issued, the timelines of permits, also the fiscal of how the department is collecting fees from the fee payers to be able to pay for the operations of what the department does. For the last 20 or 30 years, I can say the department was working off a old way of looking at things. So in 2021, there was a huge reform effort that happened. There were some programmatic changes, fiscal changes, but also what came out of that was specifically around Justice Advisory Council. For obvious reasons, there was a huge about like 20 or 30 organizations that basically indicated if we're going to do something new, is we want to be at the table. We want to be literally consulting the department and also this new board that Georgia sits now on. And that's the governance structure that we actually received from the board of 5 board members through the creation of reform. In addition to that, we were able to allocate about $2 million to start really looking at how do we fund an Environmental Justice Advisory Council that is going to be providing recommendations, input, and advice to both the department and this new board. And that's huge. And I really want to give a lot of credit for a lot of individuals in this room, and also individuals who are not in this room throughout the state that said, if you're going to do it right. Because with other Environmental Justice Advisory Councils throughout the state and other state departments, that were not funded appropriately, which meant is if you want to be a part of the council, it's going to be on your own dime. You have to travel to Sacramento and actually attend these meetings and pay your way there. And those are the things that we wanted to actually avoid. So this is why we now have the authority of the department to be able to compensate the time for the individuals who are going to be a part of this advisory council. In addition to that, we're going to be able to pay the travel. In addition to that, we're going to be able to also provide contracting services. So the Environmental Justice Advisory Council members, specific groups that we want to contract out, they can do that. And you have the authority to do that with the help of the new authority that we received recently with the budget passage of this budget cycle. Again, we'll go through a little bit around the mechanics of that. But really, this is specific language and statute that we're going to be seeing in the Senate Bill 158 that was passed again in June, July of 2021. And specifically gave us specific authority, just create a forum to develop an Environmental Justice Advisory Council. It was not prescriptive. This is why the framework comes in. The framework is giving us a prescription of what we're going to be doing with this forum, what we meaning the department, the board, and the committee. And this is why the framework is really critical in really developing the baseline of how we're going to be working with each other. Again, this is really for us, it's the floor that we want to create. This is something that we want to just put forward, and this is why we're asking for input. We understand it's not perfect, but we're really trying to get a sense of what else is needed for us to finalize the framework. And with that, we can go into the next. So like I mentioned, the development of the EJAC framework was developed last year along with this spring. And we are, and it has been up for public comment for almost 2 months, I think. And right now we're in the comment stage of basically providing comment. Once we finalize the framework, which is going to be at the end of this August, like I mentioned, really getting the application out, the final framework out. There's going to be a way that we're going to be putting the comments that we have received, and those are the letters we have received, the verbal comments, some of the virtual webinars that we have been going throughout the state in the last 2 to 3 months. They're going to be posted so individuals can actually see the comments we have been receiving. And like I mentioned, this is our 3rd in-person meeting. We had the first one in Bakersfield in the month of June, and then we had another one in Cerritos in the Bay Area in the month of July, and now we're here in August. In addition to that, we have had virtual sessions too that we have received a couple comments from individuals. I think it was really critical for us to actually have a session in the Monday about the grievance. There's a lot of activity for the individuals who are here representing Coalition Clean Air. Obviously, we have one of our permitting facilities here. Also, we have the largest cleanup site that we have in the state, also here in this location. So it was really critical for at least the department for us to be present and to actually hear from you all how we can actually improve the framework. Like I mentioned, the funding mechanism, $2 million allocated just for the people. That means the per diem, which also funds the, like I mentioned, travel reimbursement and contract. And this is something that's critical because we always said we wanted an EJAC, as you saw in the framework, that is going to be for the community, by the community, that can actually be a really equal partner to both the department and the board. And that's the goal of really developing this. The funding is limited. It's going to be starting July 1st, 2022. Like I mentioned, we have the authority set through the budget cycle that just passed, and signed into law on June 30th, 2023, until fiscal year 24-25. However, I know there's a commitment, at least for the department, and the board member can definitely attest to this, that we want to continue this moving forward. And this is something that we're going to be doing together, where if it's a common understanding that we want to actually continue this as a permanent body, then we have to look at a budget change proposal, which is basically for short of how we want a permanent body that has a permanent funding scope. And those are more discussions, and this is why my office stays closely with the breach of the board, because if we are going to be moving it into a permanent body, then we have to actually go ahead and have permanent funding. And with that, one of the things that EJAC on this framework, you can actually read that there was 2 positions that were allocated for the efforts. So there's specifically 2 individuals that are going to be just for the EJAC and the development of EJAC. And one of them, actually, we didn't have Chris introduce herself, which was, she's here on behalf of the department, but also her specific role is to help the formation of the EJAC and also assist the EJAC members with whatever they need for the, on behalf of the department. In addition to that, we will be hiring somebody else to also be assisting with the liaison efforts between the board and the department. In addition to really quickly, I know within the framework, it says the body should be consisting of at least 5 members. So that's the floor. So at least 5 members should be a part of it. The ceiling, which is the max, is going to be 25. And we allocated 25 as a max in order for us to just have a budgetary way of looking at if we have 25 members to actually pay the 25 members out of the 2 million. You don't say 25 is really the number that we want to reach, but if that's the number that everybody says, you know what, go in and have a 25 member body, that's what the recommendation we received. We heard different variations, so this is why we would love to get an input of what is the perfect number that we should run, either between 5 or 25. And just to give a little bit of that, so we'll go into discussions on that. But then I will pass it on to Georgia.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. It's on? Okay. Is it on? Yeah. All right. So I get the pleasure of detailing, sharing a little bit of the framework. I think some of you might have a copy of the single copy, but it's also available online where you can review it if you haven't done so and you want to continue the conversations after today. We really want to welcome your input and want to make sure that this framework is as strong as it can be to ensure that we are creating a strong EJAC group for the improvements on how we relate to environmental justice and the work that DTSC does. So the purpose of EJAC is really to provide an independent environmental justice advisory body. What does that mean? That means that this body is going to create its own structure. To tell the agenda of the day is to really help facilitate the advancement of environmental justice within the work that DTSC does. And as was mentioned before, the environmental safety, we do also have the goal of addressing some of these issues around environmental justice and other things, but there's limitations to what we do. But we also want to make sure that this group is that the EJAC is working with us to also achieve environmental justice within DTSC. So the whole idea is to create an independent body that is members of California throughout the regions, and really reflect improvement in environmental justice. We're hoping that it works collaboratively with community members. So this really is the body that we want to ensure that is provided the support to really work specifically with impacted communities throughout California. Next slide. It's the focus in which we entered the creation of the framework for EJAC. Really, we're centering the principles of environmental justice, which were created a while back, but we want to continue leading the principles into the working group that this body will entail. Next slide. So we want to make sure that function, as I stated earlier, that is driven by a community base. So it's a community-based approach that we really want to ensure that it's embedded in the group. It will create measurable outcomes. We try to not be as prescriptive as when we were creating the draft. Really, once we bring together the members of EJAC, we gave them enough leeway for them to decide, okay, what is going to be the area in which we're going to be focusing on to improve environmental justice within, once again, the that's DTSC. That's really important. Like, coming from the environmental justice movement, I know that there's a lot of work, and there's a lot of different agencies, but I just want to make sure that we're very clear that this group, EJAC, is to help facilitate the advancement of environmental justice within DTSC. So that's very important. The function of this group, as I stated, is they will have the ability to develop their own strategies, develop their best approach in which they want to do the work, to really advance environmental justice, address hazardous waste management, cleanups, and specifically mobile units. They will be advising PTSC as well as the Board of Environmental Safety to improve, there is reference, but it's not limited to improve community participation, environmental decision-making processes within the framework of DTSC. But that's not limited to that. If the group wants to, once the group is put together, and if they want to choose to do some other areas that they want to work on, they're going to have the ability to do so. So there's nothing to that. Next slide. They're going to be able to interact directly with department leadership as well, and as well as the Board of Environmental Safety. The Board of Environmental Safety will love to have a representative of this group to be part of our open board meetings, so they can actually report out on what's happening with the group. What are some of the areas that they're working on? What are some of the areas that they might not be advancing when they're trying to get the attention of DTSC leadership? So they're going to be able to bring those conversations out in the public, because the Board of Environmental Safety, we do work within some public requirements in terms of how we interact. Next slide. As stated by Diana, the minimum, there is a reference to a minimum right now for the framework, and it's at least 5 members. We recognize that California is pretty big, so 5 may not be the number, but at least we make a reference to a minimum. There is a maximum for the law of 25 members. There's also a reference to a representative, tribal representative as well in the framework in terms of the makeup, that we hope that is more as well. And then we also make intentional references to youth as well. We really want to encourage youth participation. I don't know if there's an age reference.
That's the 15 to 25. 15 to 25.
15 to 25, there can be some representatives from. Okay. Next slide. So right now, EJAC, because of the way this came about, it does right now, there's a reference that the group will be established till 2025, but there will be intentional commitment to try to keep it moving forward. Right now, there is a reference to June 2025. As I stated, the membership, we really want to make sure that the membership is reflective of California, meaning rural cities, tribal youth representation. We just really want to ensure that the representation of what makes California be the way that it is as a state is reflected in this group. We also want to make sure that there is a strong reflection of community impacted, specifically impacted communities. We want to ensure that representation from those communities are making up this group as well. Next slide. Please get this in reflection, diversity, recovery. as I stated earlier, this is really important. When we were trying to create different categories, we tried to stay away from that. And really uplift the representation of frontline communities, specifically residents that are being impacted because they live with some of these decisions. We want to make sure that they get that there is that representation within the group. It's not limited to, but really just trying to create a space where that voice is elevated to ensure that we are advancing solutions to address environmental justice. Next slide. This group will be appointed. So there is a committee that is going to get developed. It is going to be made up by 3 members of the greater community that are working on environmental justice issues. There will be 2 staff representatives by DTSC and 2 board members from the BES board as well. So that's going to be the committee, select committee, which will be nominating the members of the EJAC. And once we finalize this process, the framework, then we're going to go into that on-staff process of creating the committee, getting nominations of who should be part of the 3 members that are doing community work. And then DTSC will determine who are the 2 staff folks that are going to be representing the agency, and then the board of environmental safety is going to make a decision, and who are the 2 board members that are going to be representing the board, making the selection committee. There will be an application process as well. And this body is going to vet those applicants and then decide who is going to be part of that project. And of course, that selection process will be open and transparent, making sure that everybody's aware of what's happening. So all that information will be available. There is some staff support for this group as well. So as Christy's one of the staff folks that are part of this, and there'll be others that are going to be coming on board to ensure that there is support for the group. Next slide. So this group, EJAC, has, they're going to be able to create the way that they govern. Whether it be 1 chair, 2 chairs, 3 chairs, whichever, and how they're going to function, how often they're going to want to meet, if they want to create ad hoc committees, what their work will be, what areas that they want to focus on to creating their structure. They're going to be interacting with DTSC and EBS. They're going to develop their own work plan. I believe they're going to be able to manage a partial of the budget. As Diana stated, if there's need for outside support consultants, they're going to be able to make that decision as they're developing their work plan. Next slide. So as they're developing their work plan, they're going to work also closely with the board of the environmental safety as well as the director from DTSC to finalize that work plan. As I stated, our committees are encouraged, not if that's going to be based on the group's decision if they want to do that. And if they need additional support, they'll be able to give that assistance. What else? I think that's about it. There's a little bit more. I didn't go into every single aspect of the framework, but that is overall kind of like the bigger picture of this group. Definitely do encourage you to read it if you haven't done so, if you want to give us more input. And the whole purpose is, as I was going in that depth of the framework, we're not married to that. That was just kind of like what we thought of the best practices of seeing other groups, other groups that are advising other agencies. So we took from different examples, but we definitely welcome how do we make this stronger. What it looks like right now, it's a draft, it's not final. We are hoping that we can finalize it to actually get the group going and start doing the work that needs to happen. So with that, I'll turn it over to
So I know that was a lot of information, but do we have any Additional questions from anybody?
For the selection committee that will choose, the committee that will choose the EJAC members, how are you deciding which of members of environmental justice which will be a part of that?
Good question. Definitely good question. So that's where we would love to get, we have an idea. We're actually modeling other advisory groups of how they did it. They have had selection committees for members, community members sit on. But we have thought about making recommendations and then from there having individuals actually put a vote. I think it's time to, because we also, this is where we're not able to, those are the mechanics that I think we're working through. And if there's any model that we can look at, like, oh, I really love this process that the county did or the city did when they elected X, Y, and Z, we'll love to get it. All right, so we're not really married to a specific model on how we're going to select the community members who are going to do what we need to.
Can you just elaborate on what you mean about, so for instance, feedback on what the selection committee might look like in this process? Okay, yeah, we don't all, but you said you have an idea.
So we have an idea. So specifically, it's 3 community members, 3 board members, staff, and either board members, and 2 DTSC staff. I think for us, we started. We have an idea. We have an idea that we're like, okay, we're going to be selecting these 3 individuals. I think the mechanics and the difficulty part, we're not going to be able to say those 3 individuals for the time, right? So that's going to be a place where we have to be really particular. And I think when we start nominating, so for example, somebody can say, I would love to nominate myself, or I would love to nominate this person. All those comments are going to be posted. So we want to be fully transparent of these individuals that were nominated, these individuals that were considered. And then from there is really time commitment. Because really, as we start receiving applications, is really taking a time commitment of reading those applications and making sure that there's going to be a criteria. And we're going to be posting the criteria of how those individuals can be selected, right? I think we want to be just transparent in the sense of that selection, because that's really critical and really pivotal of how we move forward, right? Who's going to be actually selected? And I think for us specifically, Jillian's role specifically in the Office of Environmental Equity, we would love to actually have somebody from DTSC staff from the Office of Environmental Equity, because that's public participation. They're going to be working really closely with the EJAC, and they're going to take a role, at least on the DTSC side. We'll be transparent, right? These are the 2 individuals from DTSC, 2 individuals from the board, and then the 3, like I mentioned, these are the individuals that nominated themselves or were nominated by X, Y, and Z. And then from there, we'll go through kind of a process of how we select those 3 individuals. And that's something that we have had individuals submit ways of recommending. And we're taking in that comment of like, okay, this is a good process that we can take on based on our current just processes in general of the state. Because we have to. Okay. Oh.
So I understand that for now, the membership number is 5. I know that's tentative and compared with it. It can go up to 25 members. But in terms of the makeup ratio, right here we have 3 community members and yes, two DTSC staff and 2 BES staff. What I'm reading is that we're going to have 3 community members and 4 state agents. Will state agents always outnumber the amount of community members in the EJAC?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's just a selection process to create the EJAC. EJAC is just members so DTSC and BES would be present, because obviously the topics are going to be based on the work that a lot of it is DTSC does, right? But there's no, like, we're taking right? The EJAC can be from 5 to 25, and that's either nonprofits, residents, or really want to stress the resident part of it. And whomever makes up that.
As I understand the objective of the board of London Safety, the board is going to assess, the members are going to assess the contaminated sites which need cleanup, assessment and cleanup. Because I work on quite such items per month with the board and that investigated cleanup and redeveloped into a shopping center. So I'm familiar with the process and what I see here in the board among the non-board is 25 members. And I think the members should be based on the number of contaminated sites. And in the area, in Southern California, it was big in the area. There are different sites, there are big states in different sites, the aerospace manufacturing sites, trading shops. So there are a lot of contaminated sites, refineries, so, but so many people, I think, but they don't have the technical expertise to understand what really in depth the nature and extent of contamination. So, well, I would recommend that there should be more technical experts also in the board. For example, professional geologists, certified hydrogeologists, PE, especially chemical engineers who have designed the remediation systems. Toxicologists, of course, that's included already. But environmental scientists is also, but I have to say the environmental scientist should be a specialist who has the expertise in bioremediation. The bioremediation is very applicable in many sites, oriented sites or DTSC sites. So I was saying that the number of members in the board should be based on those criteria so that the board can assess what kind of sites are there, can evaluate, the members can assess and also have the community really that some communities may be very contaminated, the other may be less contaminated. So we have to screen the communities which need more help and prioritize those. So that's what I understand. So
let me just, before you go into the next thought. So two things. This is not about PES. So let's make sure that the board, the environmental safety board was defined by the bill. And that's 5 members and that's been done. This is for the creation of the Environmental Justice Advisory Council, right? And the makeup of that right now, the only reference there is gotta have a reflection of California, minimum of 5 members, maximum of 25 members. It's really a space that was intentionally not defined by the bill. But really, if you speak to the folks that did a lot of work, the heavy work to create this bill, the intention was a space for residents. And we can get into the debate of residents not being scientific, if they're living with the impacts. But we're not going to get into that debate right now. It's more about making sure that we are creating a body that is advising DTSC and BES to address environmental justice. And environmental justice is not just about cleanups, it's about prevention. It's about how we engage residents to participate in decision-making processes, right? As DTSC is evaluating siting permits, BES, we have the authority to oversee when permits are being challenged. So that's our authority. So we want to incorporate community members. We're about to start launching the updates of fees for these sites, right? If they should be changed or whatnot. So we really want to create this body of EJAC that is really reflective and to ensure that they're assisting us in addressing environmental justice and preventing additional harm to the community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I understand the targeting part for other communities and also society. And I think that's the main, my understanding is that a lot of this community is concerned about determination at their sites. In the they want to clean up if there's one contaminated or the government's contaminated or they have everybody. So that's what you need to look at. In fact, we need to really assess by using experts, then assess what needs to be done on this.
Yeah.
Yes. Who can clean up, who can assess those sites? Because just making a board probably does not work, because we need to get the work done there.
So just to, huge reason why, the EJAC, so hopefully we're not confusing board members as individuals, that's in statute, there's 5 board members, specific criteria and, within the board to actually be on the board. And that by, right now it's, off my head is public health, so if you're a member of public health or an environment, you have to be on the board, or you have to live in impacts to be on the board. A geologist, if you have a board, a toxicologist, if you have a board, and also if you're an attorney who knows environmental policies. So those are the 5 sections with the board of environmental safety, like Bridget, they're already sitting, there's 5 board members. What the group is, and this is why I mentioned it, there's $2 million for the EJAC's function, including contracting. Because we realize there has been a mistrust that has been developed for years between the department and the community. And we're cognizant, this is huge. And I give a lot of credit to a lot of organizations that advocated for this, because they said, we want to hire our own toxicologists. We want to hire our own geologists. We want to hire our own public health officials, to your point, to tell us if this is clean, and to tell us if this is going to be a proper cleanup. And we don't want to dictate that. We want the committee, the advisory council, to actually hire their own staff. We'll just contract with them, and they're going to be working with you. But the advisory committee is going to select the experts, not us. And that's super important just because of the mistrust that has been developed of what community needs versus them asking for what they should have, right? So that is something that in the passage of the trailer bill this past budget cycle, we were able to get authority for the advisory committee to actually contract services for these. Okay.
And I understand about having members, of course, that are experts. Of course, that makes total sense. We don't want people, we don't want committee members who have absolutely no idea what they're doing. But what's important, and I want to voice, is that we need community members, and one of the important in those members. Reason why is because as a resident here in Boyle Heights, no one's come talk to us about the history that's going on here. People are leaving, people are moving out. Realtors are not telling people that are coming to buy these homes. These grounds are contaminated. People here all over have had cancer. They thought that by moving to Victorville, they're not going to be affected. But their children were affected because they grew up here for 40, 50, 60 years. My sisters here can actually testify to that. We have lost faith to this group that has come and done their cleanup. They come, they give us a wishy-washy, yeah, we can do this, we can do that. And okay, for the few of us like myself that said, okay, come, do the cleanup. Did they offer me somewhere to go while they do the cleanup? Yes, I admit it. But for $100, where many stay for $100 while they do the cleanup? And the attitude was very wishy-washy. While I didn't want to, they don't. Then it took my partner to take out of his time instead of working in our home. He's out there cleaning up all the Starbucks, clubs, and trash that the workers are getting out on 8th Street.
Because llegan temprano, they come and they're getting ready to work. So they bring their coffee, they bring their pastries. That's awesome. Pero dejan su basura, they leave all their trash out there. So we're the ones who are cleaning up out there. We don't have the support from the city coming and doing a trash pickup. You have a lot of residents out here that have the mentality, it is the city's job to come and clean it up. When was the last time the city came and cleaned it up? It's been hours to clean up our neighborhood. The homelessness encampments, the fact that we have an RV that's been sitting out there between Fresno and South Grande on 8th Street with a bucket underneath, throwing their feces in the storm drain. And I gotta be on the phone for an hour to convince the representative who answers the phone that this isn't the city of Commerce. This is Boyle Heights. No, ma'am, we don't work in that area. We're being hit by every different direction. I have neighbors who have served our country. You think they can wheel themselves out while this company comes and cleans up the lead? They have nowhere else to go. Nowhere else comes and explains and translates what's going on. Why they gotta come and clean up? Okay, you decide not to, what are the risks? Porque no entienden el inglés, they don't understand the English. Because no one's coming to talk to them. Here I am walking my dog, starting random conversations with neighbors. Hi, how are you? Did you know what this is? Did you know what's going on in the city? No, we have no idea. Oh, but we're gonna get our homes fixed. That's their answer, because we're gonna have our yard really pretty. Really? So how are you being explained how this whole yard thing is being done? Because I know my place isn't all that great. I got a bunch of weeds now. I got the foundation moving. I got a trimmed on my stairs now. And I got a bunch of rocks in the back, and I had to be out of my own pocket to lift the wall because all the dirt that was placed on my property, which of course I'm trying to be environmentally conscious here, like desert landscape to save water, right? Everything's so crazy expensive. It's running over to my neighbor's homes. Why didn't the project manager tell us, hey, this isn't gonna work? This is the type of trouble you're gonna end up seeing. Where's the experience? Why is my partner having to teach some of the workers how to remove a tree stump? Because he couldn't take it out. They came back and they told him, oh, we can't take out this tree stump, sir. What do you mean? It's dead. No, we can't take it out. So when you don't have the equipment, you don't have the experience. So here's my partner out there midday digging it out, and then he showed you boys how it's done. And he showed them how it was done, how it can be done. That is what I got to share. I hope and also in some sort of way our experience here in Royal Heights is not lost away. You're walking to talk to your neighbors. Very strange. But they'll talk to you if you take the time.
I know, and I definitely want to acknowledge that huge reason why, like you mentioned, community expertise is an expertise. Lived experience is an experience. And that's where I think personally, we also want to come. Right? Because it's a lot. Like you took the time to be here and speak your truth. And I know I spoke to Dion, who's going to be actually talking to you afterwards about what we talked about, right? Like you shouldn't be compensating for things that should have been paid by the contract. And there's a lot here. And, you know, we're talking to a couple of elected officials because this cleanup is not just a state kind of response. It's like overall, it has been a huge cleanup that involves everybody, city, local, regional, state. And it's not going to be done in the next day. It's not going to be done in the next week. And that's what we're trying to figure out. How do we fix the line of communication where if people are not being heard, they have their own community members they can go to and say, hey, I'm not listening. I'm trying to tell people what's wrong and I'm not being heard. Right? Because we have channels, but sometimes the channels are not the proper way. So we want to figure out how do we change our practices, and that's practices throughout all levels of the department. And I think being cognizant of that is going to take time. And I'm really, to your point, is really figuring out how do we fix what's wrong now how do we actually correct for the next 5, 10, 20 years? Because the reality is a lot of these facilities are still going to be up. A lot of these functions are still going to happen. How do we coexist if we need to coexist? And how do we actually fix what's wrong? And really getting to the nuts and cracks of how to actually change it. So I do appreciate that. Going back.
So I'm glad you said that, yeah, because this is what I'm thinking about this whole process. You know, this EJAC was decided on because my understanding is the original plan, or one of the plans for the BDS was to actually have an environmental justice representative, a community representative, or representatives on that board of environmental safety, so that there would be a permanent person or persons who would have the same voice and vote as all the other BDS members. But that was jettisoned as an idea, and so the EJAC was the consolation prize for environmental justice communities to have some say in the reform of the agency. So let's be really clear. The EJAC comes out of a reform because DTSC has been so broken for so long, and you are acknowledging this, that, you know, there was an acknowledgement then that this was really from the bottom up. We were going to reform the agency so that all of its practices would be geared effectively towards the protection of communities, because it hadn't been doing that work effectively, and it continues to have problems, as you suggest. So fall 2021, my understanding is this law gets passed, but it's a whole year later that the EJAC finally starts to get developed. That was last year. And now we're another year into this process, almost 2 years since the law was passed. And we still don't have an EJAC set up. And we have, and the clock is ticking. Clock is ticking, and we've got till the end of June 2025, which is by the time we get, I mean, you have a next steps slide here, but the next steps slide is pretty empty. And I'm thinking, next steps, election committee constituted. We don't know what that's going to look like yet. Application has to go out. What's the application going to look like? Don't know yet. Applications are going to have to be received and vetted, and we're going to have to decide on who's going to be on the committee and who's not, how we're going to choose those, and all of this is going to take time. And that is the E event. You know, we haven't even talked about the board, the EJAC folks deciding on how they're going to run themselves, what committees they're going to subcommittees. I mean, it's just craziness, folks. I don't know how you're thinking this is even realistic to say that you have only till June, the end of June 2025 for this to live, because by that point, we're barely going to get started. And then what? So why would anyone want to participate on something when the clock is ticking right now and the plug's going to get pulled potentially, and now what? You know, we've got years of reform that have to happen. You said it yourself right now. We've got 5, 10 years. We're barely getting started on changing the way DTSC does its work in communities. It's not just about cleanup. It's about significant nuts and bolts, top to bottom, reform of the way DTSC does its work. And that means the necessity of communities having a voice in that process, because it's where communities know what's going on, and you folks just don't. That's just how we see it all the time. And if you're not constantly hearing from us, and not just listening, like the public participation, yeah, that seems like a great idea, and it is, but really taking that and making it real by then taking our suggestions and changing practices, like tangibly changing the way you do your work, that's what will make the difference in people's lives. That is a long time. That's a lot of work that will take a long time. So what am I adding? What does this all add up to? I don't want you to squander this great opportunity. This is a fantastic opportunity to do the right thing. And I would just hate for this to fizzle out in less than a year. And then what? And we're all just sitting around wondering what's going to happen next. I think we need a plan now. Right now, we need a plan now for how this EJAC continues into far into the future to support the reform that needs to happen at this agency. And I don't think we can move forward without a solid plan right now and a timeline that shows out far out into the future what this committee, what this advisory council is going to look like and what kind of work will happen to make DTSC a different agency. Adding to that, I guess like it's also it's going to take so long to even get to that point of it being an actual body, right? And even if it does get extended, the powers that are given to the EJAC don't subscribe to the principles of environmental justice that you guys put in the document. Like I wrote down environmental justice, this was principle 7. Environmental justice demands the right to participate as equal partners at every level of decision making, including needs assessment, planning, implementation, enforcement, and evaluation. The only power that the EJAC that is given to the EJAC is needs assessment. Just talking to community members and the EJAC then advises the DTSC. I know that with the Clean Air Coalition and the issue of EcoBat, there has been plenty of advising from community members directly to the DTSC, and it's just more talking. So this EJAC, even though it does address, this needs assessment, talking to community members, it doesn't address actually getting the work done. And it only extends so far because people have already been expressing their needs and the DTSC has not done very much of anything.
I do want to refer that too. Just address them. I don't know if Georgia has anything to add, but at least to AFC, the tend to agree, completely agree. If it was personally the old DTSC, we would have put the framework a year and a half ago. People would have probably criticized it. Probably no one would have applied to it. And there was being no ownership to it. I think for us is how do we do it different? And we're not going to get it right because we're just people too, right? I think we're trying to figure out how do we create the framework that can be a permanent thing. The funding that we're talking about is just for 1225, but I think there's a commitment, at least on behalf of the department, also on behalf, I don't want to speak for the board, that we want to continue this because we need it. How do we move forward on the reform efforts if we don't put community first? That's real. And the genesis was there was a really good talk about having an environmental justice board member on the 5-board-member board. That's real. But also everybody wanted a board member. Everybody, the other stakeholders, all the different stakeholders. Business industry wanted a board member, so instead we went into criteria subject matter expertise. Because regardless of who you are, we want subject matter expertise. So if you are coming from environmental justice community, if you're coming from the business industry, to your point, have some baseline of what the department does and how we can actually work towards bettering, right? And then two, as a compromise was we need an environmental justice advisory advising the board and the department. How we do that, this is where the discussion comes in. I think there's a commitment that we do want to make this permanent. I think it's what do we make permanent if we don't even know if the community actually wants it, right? So we can say, hey, let's make this permanent, it's going to be a permanent body for the next 10, 20 years, but no one's really taking ownership of the individuals that need to be taking ownership, then what are we making permanent? So that was something that we had to really grapple with. The funding that we got was 4 or 5 year funding source. That's fine. We'll use it as a pilot program. But really with the commitment of really extending it to a permanent body, that's going to take a whole process, I can say. It's going to be really a process going to start next year for the funding to actually not have a lapse year between 2024 and 2025 and have a continuing funding source. I think the question is really $2 million what we need? Do we need more money? What is going to be the resources that we need? Do we need more staffing? Those are all the questions that have to be really going into justification of extending this body. And that's a discussion between really the different bodies that we oversee, the department, specific Department of Finance, the legislature, being one of them, and also the government office. Just being super transparent on that. Because for us to say we want to make this permanent, what are we making permanent? And for whom? Those were the questions that we were. And I think we had to step back and just say, this is a pilot, but a pilot with the ability to actually increase the permanency of really looking at how we, to your point, really good point, all facets. If we're gonna be intentional, it's not just an advisory and a needs assessment, it's really looking at when we actually issue permits. Cleanups, question, how many cleanups we have in the state right now? There's about, I could say 1,000 cleanups happening. Some of them are actually open sites, some of them are volunteer agreements. I think the question is, which ones are most in need? What are the different lenses we have to look at to clean up? So these are all the questions we're grappling, and it's something the department is grappling with, along with the board, of what do we need to focus and who is going to be providing that perspective, right? And it's not going to be an overall like transformation that's going to happen in a year, for sure. But I think, you know, all of us were here because it's not like a year commitment. It's going to be a commitment that at least if we create a foundation, it's going to actually move off forward. That in 5 years, we can make assessments and say, you know what, the outreach was actually really meaningful. We really enjoyed X, Y, and Z. How do we duplicate that in other sites throughout the state? And I can say California, not the only one grappling with this. It's throughout the nation, that throughout the country, organizations are grappling. Organizations like DTSC and USCPA and CalP are grappling. How do we work the community? And what is meaningful engagement? And those are really loaded questions that everybody's trying to answer right now. And believe me, you guys have been a part of some of those conversations of how do we actually include equity in every artwork, right? You've been hearing a lot of that. And I think we're trying to be a little bit intentional about that too. I don't know if you want to. Yeah, I'll add a couple of things in addition to what Diana just said. So, I'm a board member, right? And it was at that point in this, I was doing environmental justice, and I still do environmental justice in San Diego. I've been doing that for over 20 plus years. And I actually got nominated as well, and I brought this experience as we were developing this framework. I was part of the EJAC, the CARB, the California Air Resource Board has. And some of you might be familiar with that body, some of you might not, but I can tell you that that experience was really frustrating for the EJ folks. And they brought that, I shared it, and I continue to share it as we're developing this framework, that I don't want us to create that, right? And that was very prescriptive, very much driven by staff, and it was literally just, I would say, a box to check. We have an EJ process. I can express to you all that I've been saying this as we're creating this draft, that we cannot do that. We've been challenging DTSC leadership. What is it that folks, yes, they're going to get compensated, fine, right? And that's great. I'm not minimizing that. It's really important. But also, I just want to make sure that we are creating a space, and DTSC's leadership is going to be listening and acting on the recommendations that this group will be creating. So that's stuff that there's mention in the framework, but we're still trying to figure out what that looks like. So there is that commitment, right? There isn't a clear, this is what the way that it's going to look like, because agencies don't operate in such a way, right? There's the leadership, there's directors and so forth, and folks control certain things and things like that. So that's a conversation that right now, as we're even creating this draft, we're still having in terms of one of the criticisms that we have heard as we've been venturing this input on this draft is, okay, we don't want this body to just be advising, right, to your point. We've been advising, but we're not changing. So we want to make sure, what does that look like from DTSC? What is that commitment? And what should it look like on the paper right now? Because right now it's not as strong as it could be. So I say that to say that we understand where the gaps are based on the conversations that we've been having. I would love to hear more, like, this is the way it should look like. This is the way it could be reworded or in addition to, because that would help. That would help the creation of finalizing this agreement. So all of that to say is that I've been sharing some of that, and we're working through it. We're having that delegate dance But I also want to make sure that we're not creating, at least I don't want to be part of something that's just creating this body that's not going to make substantial changes at DTSC. And I said it to DTSC director. So just like those before you, no, because he's been waiting before you, so, sorry, you can keep that mic on.
Thank you. My name is Hector. Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for the presentation and for those of you who have been putting together this framework about acknowledging some inconsistencies, thinking about how to make it better. I just want to second what Rebecca was saying about how we think this is a great opportunity. And we really want to see it coming to fruition and exemplify those guiding principles that are stated there, right? But a part of me is worried that, you know, those principles are going to be an empty platitude. You know, for the past couple of decades, I think when people hear the DTSC talking about environmental justice, that's exactly what it is, right? Just empty words, something to try to make people feel that they're acknowledging our concerns and that they, you know, they want to advocate for us and bring justice to our communities. But most of the times we don't see it, right? And so, yeah, I'm worried about the real power that this spot is going to have, right? We want to bring frontline communities to the table in a grouping like this. And like other people have mentioned, there's countless communities throughout California. So we really need to consider how to best empower all of these communities, and not only to so that they can serve as an advisory role, as people have been saying, but to have some authority that can really challenge the DTSC, the status quo, the pattern of decision making, right? The DTSC has powers. It has the ability, right, to deny permits, to suspend operations, even to bring criminal charges against facilities, right? But we rarely see that happen, right? So what I want to see in this framework is that if our community members who have our own lives to deal with, if we're going to take time out of our lives, away from our families, to be a part of a system that has failed us so that we can really be the drivers of real change, then there has to be mechanisms that can actually create change, right? And so what I'm getting at is kind of what Alyssa was getting at about how in these guiding principles, right, it's about being equal partners and having the ability to also be a part of enforcement, right? So what I want to see is when the DTSC doesn't enforce its regulations, right, in our community, EJAC was out of compliance on a major permit regulation since it was issued in 2005, and it didn't get resolved until 15 years later. That's 15 years that our groundwater that we drink water from has been contaminated. And what was done about that? I'm sure the DTSC could have leveraged its powers to make sure that that was followed through, right? But it didn't, right? Sometimes it feels like the DTSC is a little bit scared. Sometimes they feel like the DTSC is protecting industry. And I think that's the elephant in the room, right? That DTSC, while there are great people in there trying to do great work, there's also people that represent the interests of industry who work against the community, right? And so, right, what I want to see is if the body comes into fruition when facilities are out of compliance in that way that's impacting the lives, the health of people, our environment, that we can step in when the DTSC isn't taking charge, and we can make sure that there is enforcement, right? Or something like that. But yeah, right. We've seen patterns over and over again, right? It's not just in my community, but it's all over California. The community of Boyle Heights, right? After you shut it down and there's a cleanup, you think that that's the victory, right? But then there's this box cleanup, right? Where there's the contractors aren't doing the job that they're doing. And in some cases, I think it's been found that some of the soil that's contaminated gets transported to the Inland Empire and used to fill in for grading for developments, right? That to me is operating as if the DTSC and this like cleanup faction of it is operating on a business model, right? Cut corners, save some money. And that's not the job of the DTSC. The DTSC is not a business, right? It's not supposed to get into the logic of all of these facilities that's like business oriented. We can't suspend operations. It's going to hurt the economy. While those are important things, right? People's jobs and our economy, our lives come first, right? The lives of our family, of our younger siblings, right? But we've seen just like the community here has some, family members and community members plagued with health illnesses. We've seen it in our community too, right? And we want to put an end to that. And, we don't want this body to be something that, while it comes into fruition and becomes platitudes, we keep seeing our community members being harmed, right? So we want to be able to check, use the DTSC's own laws, even the laws of our state, of the nation, that the DTSC won't enforce. If they won't enforce them, I want this body to be able to enforce them.
Yeah, just to echo off of that, I'm also a resident of Hacienda Heights, which is where tobacco, aka EcoVat is. And I know that this EJAC council framework or this committee is not the only option. But it is, if it is the best that all of you can think of in such a short amount of time, which is about a year, which is not short at all. You guys need to give the people in their communities their actual power already. You're standing there saying the same thing over and over and over again. I don't know how we're gonna do what the communities want. Oh, we want to listen to you. But to be honest, all of us have been voicing all of our concerns and have been ignored for years. So do you think they're really listening to us? Do you think this body is actually gonna listen to an entity that makes recommendations, advice, and consultations? Guys, it's in page 2 of this paper right here. It's not that hard to comprehend. Over 25, or at least 25% of DTSC's facilities that they oversee don't operate with a permit. Do you think they're listening? Do you think they're going to listen? I do not think so. I do not think that this is a complete waste of time, waste of taxpayer money, $2 million, and you're asking for more. I think this is absolutely ridiculous, and we're not buying it. She's not buying it, they're not buying it, I'm not buying it, we're not buying it.
So I want to clarify to say 25% of our facilities don't have a permit. Okay,
They operate without a permit, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay, point. I can understand the concern of the community, but the community is like this, now with the regulator. I think an easier way would be to identify the sites. If you are living in a site that, in a community that has contaminated sites, identify those sites. And then, inform your agency, whether it's a water board or DTSC or USCPA, and let them know that we have a regulation there. And then what happens is that water board or DTSC or USCPA will pressure the responsible parties of the site.
Yeah, they prevent everything you also already know the sites. This is the problem. The DTS, you know the sites, the DTS, you know the sites. After decades, they continue. Because they are dead.
Just let me finish the talk. And then going to do whatever. I'm suggesting is that DTSC, well, whatever the agency is, they don't have billions of dollars to spend on environment. In my 32 years experience in the agency and the consulting, they actually depend. But when I was working there, I have to charge my for my review, my direction, my guide, all my contamination assessment and cleanup, whatever expertise I was offering, the responsible party, the contaminated people, the owner or whatever, they were paying for my direction, my requirements, which I was spending the agency. So it's impossible to expect that DTC will come up with $1 trillion and clean up all the community. No, that's totally unpractical. But that the only thing is that there should be a partnership with the agencies, and they want to sincerely listen to you, but they hand the tide also because there's a lot of pressure. There are hundreds of $1 billion worth of corporations. They have a lot of pressure. if they are 200 DTSC people or whatever people or USDK people, they are overruled. They didn't have that money because these agencies are run by our tax dollars. So they don't have unlimited amount of money. The only thing is that we should go through the agencies and definitely enforce the law on the polluters on our sites. If all the communities will do that, I think that there's good hope that it will not take 20 years or 30 years to clean up the site.
So,
You've been here for decades.
so let's, I think acknowledge a little bit of, this is, the perspective, but this is where perfect example, he's talking to his lens, right, his lived experience. That's what he's experiencing. I think this is where trying to really bring a table of what your lived experience, right? And I'm not saying you have to agree with him or like that. That's not what our mind saying is. This is where, how do we unpack what he's saying and how do we unpack what he's saying? And there's not going to be an agreement with both parties, but he is explaining literally how the process unfortunately works and doesn't work. And I think this is what we need community perspective of how do we interject as a state agency based on our authority, what I'm hearing as a state agency, as a department, we're not utilizing our authority the way we should. And those are the conversations that we should start having. Right? Because again, is what are we doing to figure out how to actually try to change the lived experience for people that have not seen change. And this is why I'm here.
But anything change because you're dead.
But I think trying to recognize and acknowledge there's a lot of individuals that should be here and not here.
He's spoken up and we're literally told, sir, you're too passionate. Literally terminally ill. And he knows his history from this area. So I understand hearing somebody else's experience, but you are literally stepping ground on like an area where it's completely and crazy contaminated. So as my friend said here, these are your reasons for coming here because you're talking to residents here who are greatly affected. And as I just mentioned, one is terminally ill. And he is not here today because he's up to his neck and being told, sir, you're too passionate over this. So that's our community speaking up. Now we are stripped down. So where's the trust?
With that, I'm gonna go with Joe, and then we'll go into.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is Joel Torres. Before I am a county representative, I am also a person. I grew up in East Los Angeles, and I just want to remind folks that I am a supervisor, very proud of you for being here and voicing your opinions. Now I'm going to speak with my county perspective and just let you know that as an environmental health deputy for the County of Los Angeles for Supervisorial District 4, that I'm the representative of Supervisor Janice Hahn, and I want to inform DTSC and all of our constituents that the County Department of Public Health and the County Supervisor's Office are present at this workshop. We encourage all residents, especially residents suffering most from the pollution, to get involved in the Environmental Justice Advisory Committee, to use your voice. Your participation will represent our community's interest in achieving more environmentally just outcomes. Finally, the county is gathering information and plans to submit written comment on the EJAC framework. Thank you so much for your participation tonight.
My name is Karen Noga. I live here in Boyle Heights. I think a lot of you from the DTSC look new to me. They seem to have a high turnover of employees. It's like a revolving door of people. So it's like every time it's a start over because everyone's brand new. So we start over from the beginning. It's like starting over from the beginning each time, going through the whole explanation of how it all started with excise and the pollution and the whole thing. As long as everyone's clear, we're still living in a toxic environment. This place is polluted. It's sad to say. I'm a homeowner. I hate to admit it, I don't want to admit it, but the property here is worthless, but we have to pretend it's not. And then my question is the reason you're creating the Environmental Justice Advisory Council, is that just to cover up the inside things so we don't talk about it anymore? And we're gonna forget about it and hope it goes away so you don't have to do anything about it? Because nothing's really being done to resolve the issue. The ground's still polluted, it's still toxic. The cleanup hasn't worked. People are still sick, as they say, they're dying. They're dead already. And those who now, some of their symptoms are coming out and they are sick now. A lot of people are sick and do have illnesses. And which the DTSC denied that for years in the past. In the beginning, they said, you know, they were due to other things. It wasn't about the exile. It's not only the land, it's the other chemicals that they spewed in the air, like the arsenic and the benzene and all those other things that were in the air that polluted and poisoned people. They gave them those things in cancer, which didn't show up in the blood tests. So yeah, that sounds like a good idea, the advisory thing, but it's still not addressing the problem. And you're here now, but are you going to be here in 6 months, 8 months? There's going to be new people in charge, and it's going to be a whole new program. There'll be a whole new leadership, a whole new idea. When the funds run out in 2025, is anybody going to be there to support us? Because no one's supporting us now. And it's been mismanagement by the DTSC, not yourselves personally, but as a government agency. It's been mishandled, and it's still not being handled, and it's still not being cleaned up. It's not being addressed, and people are frustrated and they're getting nasty and mean about it. And, you know, and life goes on, and the common consensus now is like, well, they're just going to ignore it till everybody dies, moves away, and then just business is more important, and then they'll just build new properties on top of tear down the old ones, build new things, and life will go on, and they'll just, you know, it's more important to make money and build new projects, new commerce, and big apartment buildings and gentrify the whole neighborhood. And so what if the future generation people die and they're living on toxic ground? Doesn't matter. It's better to make money. So what if the other people die? Because it's prime real estate.
So, I actually wanted to talk about the funding because there's points that I agree with you. That state agencies like the DTSC, they absolutely don't have the funding to take on all of these cleanups all at once. Community members, we don't have the money either. Some of us are like talking. So this isn't right. And as you stated, the businesses, the private interests that we are going up against, they do have the money. So why don't we get them to clean up their problems? When we have lawsuits, perpetrators, criminals, they have to pay the victim. Why aren't criminal private interests, criminal polluters like Medco EcoBat, Exide, why aren't they paying for cleanups? And the DTSC can say, well, yes, they do. You could get them. Except DTSC members who are formerly of the private interest through a revolving door, they come in and successfully lobby for the DTSC's order for the money from private interest to come down. And this is what leads to agencies like the DTSC not having the money for cleanup. This is why private individuals have to kind of pocket for cleanup. We need to bar the law. That's what it is. Get private money from these polluters, out of state agencies, and when they are proven criminal, then take their money not by underhanded dealing, but through the court system. Don't let them lobby it down, make them pay for their crimes. And the GTSC understands that they're not trusted. This doesn't just come out of nowhere. This isn't out of the ether. We didn't just decide one day, oh, fuck the GTSC. It's because of years, decades of continued failures of continually looking after private interests. And Mexico in the state of industry on this Halo Valley, they've been a problem. The DTSC has known about them since 1994, I think, 1996. The community has known that they're being negatively affected by light poisoning from Mexico since even before that, and nothing is happening. This is causing distrust, and I wanted to bring up membership again. Members of EJAC will be appointed by some community members and some state agents. How can we trust that the DTSC, their EJAC appointees, how can we trust them? How can we trust that the DTSC will appoint essentially lobbyists? How can we trust that they won't appoint people that are going to disrupt and even sabotage community members within the EJAC? How can we trust that they're going to actually finally listen to us? How can we trust that they're going to get private money out of the pre-process? How can we trust that they're actually going to hold the DTSC, the DES, criminal polluters accountable? It's all, some of what our community members have said is just how can we trust them? Yeah.
So just on that, I think what will be really highly, and I'm with you, this is not going to be the solution for everything. I think the question is, should we just not do anything?
Well, we have to do something.
So that's
DTSC's job.
and
Community members have kids telling the DTSC to do something for decades. So what is the purpose of this? It feels like another bureaucratic barrier that is going to stop community members from actually trying to do something. How can we trust that the DTSC will act?
yeah, so that's, I think those are the questions we're asking is what is the selection criteria? You brought up a good point. There's 3 members and there's 4. So the question is, do we need
already answers to these questions? Yeah, that we want, that these communities want criminal polluters prosecuted. We want polluters shut down. We want our communities cleaned up. You already know the answers to these questions that you want the EJAC. You are setting up the EJAC to ask the community what they want. The community already knows what they want. The community has been saying what they want for decades. The DTSC has not done anything for decades. The very few times that they have has been diminished by private interests.
And this is where we're really, one of the huge reasons why we didn't develop the guidelines of what the EJAC is going to follow is because we want the EJAC to develop that for themselves. Huge reason.
And how can we trust the EJAC if they are getting members appointed by agencies that we already don't trust? Agencies that have continually failed the community.
So if you're saying because there's 3 and then there's 2 representatives from DTSC and 2 board members, if I'm hearing you, there should be more representatives to ensure that they're at the fore. And by the way, I do not do the vetting of any in clothing industry. I do not do that vetting whatsoever, right? But regardless, if that's what you're saying, we can consider that. That's part of the feedback that we're trying to get. So if you're saying there should be more than 3 in the selection committee, if that's what you're saying.
All members of the EJAC should come out of the community voted on by
And how would that look like?
people coming together and voting, set up by DTSC, set up by the state, but the state is still ultimately hands off in the selection process. People like the Clean Air Coalition or other community members, they get the chance to vote without agency.
We will take that into consideration. Somebody waiting.
Has he done any outreach to any of the councils to join this committee? Because I was just at a neighborhood council meeting and DTSC hasn't been there in years. Since I would say 2008 was the last time I saw DTSC at a neighborhood council meeting in Laurel Heights. You know?
And that's good feedback.
Yeah, neighborhood councils. Like honestly, you guys should join up. Like there should be somebody from each neighborhood council on this board. Definitely. Because that's our community right there. The people that have the most experience, but then again, like they were saying, they need to be vetted. Because in our own neighborhood councils, there is special interest. There is people that work for nonprofits that are on there for their own special interest. So even in our own neighborhood council, we have to vet them. So definitely they have to make sure that they do not work for anybody that will have a conflict of interest in this development at all. Because that's where the community gets screwed every single time.
As the lady said, that if the community is allowed to fix your business, your company experience in IT in investigation. If they allow them, allow you, the community, then it should happen. And you will take, the community should take for the services of that, because again, in the agencies, whether it's USCPA or Water Board or DTSC, personally, I've seen that it's very hard to resist the big pressure from outside and to enforce the law. But the community power is most important power.
And I do appreciate that. And those are the things I think personally, this is why the framework it's not right. Because there's a selection criteria, there's models that you can say, we really appreciate it to your point. At the neighborhood council, I can say there's other models at the state level to avoid the conflict of interest. We have taken those lessons learned. They're not perfect either, but if you can point models of like, hey, you should follow the 617 model, which is obviously the air quality kind of ability, right? Because CARB has developed that, and that's throughout the state. That's something to consider. But to your point, this is a regional and a statewide body. We want to focus on the regions that we have a lot of activity, thus Southern California, thus LA, thus the area. I think to your point, too, about EJAC, we're not trying to forget EJAC. There's actually a meeting, the EJAC Technology Advisory Council, this upcoming Wednesday in the Commerce area, to specifically talk about EJAC. I think the question is, what's the nexus there? If there's CAGs around the state, should we have one representative from the CAG, just throwing ideas, what we heard, in the EJAC? Because they're already representing the communities, right? So those are the ideas. We'd love to actually get a sense of, hey, the connections are there. Just make them work and connect them.
And using the Brown Act, Robert's Rules of Order. That's like the basics of how any public meeting should be run. And that should be the basis of where you get your bylaws. Like that's where it should start right there.
And I'm so with you. This is where we're having the EJAC. And I really, this is how I think the foundation is really critical. Because once the foundation is not established in a way that there's community ownership, then everything else is. I so acknowledge that. Okay, and I do agree that this is work, right? You guys are here, you've been here for 2.5 hours. So acknowledging that. And that's one of the things, at least for us, is how do we change the way we look at it? And that's hard for state and even local or federal agencies, because we're built to be bureaucratic. That's the nature of how we're built. Unfortunately, there's a movement now that is really trying to bring communities first. How do you do that? And those are the questions we're asking and we're grappling. And one of the things, at least for us, is how do we do it that's actually sustainable? Huge reason. Sustainability is huge here. Because like you said, 5, 6, 10, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going to be at. I can't say I'm going to be here a year, 2, 3 years from now because life changes. I have family that needs me or whatever the case is. But I think the reality is to sustain something for the work to continue regardless of the person. And a lot of us have believed that. And I think it's hard, and it's been a year, at least for me, I've been here since the reform efforts, and it's hard. But this is something I can say, it's the ask that a lot of community organizations that ask for reform said, without this, everything else doesn't matter. And that's real. Okay, so with that, I do want to acknowledge that we are a little bit after time. Happy to ask if there's any clarifying questions, but I do agree. We did record this meeting for obvious reasons. We're going to take down the notes. We're going to go ahead and post the comments. Then you're going to start seeing changes to the final draft. The application is attached. Like I mentioned, it's really bare bones because we want to make a really critical process. But I think the question about selection is something that, at least in this meeting, out of all the meetings we have had, was really the focus. But I do want to have you guys really provide any feedback. Also, you know, this is something that, at least for us, is even if the final framework is like, look, you guys completely missed the mark, is, you know, this is where we're trying to actually figure out how do we actually be responsive and how do we actually make the changes that we need to, is feel free to follow with any of us. And happy to, you know, give our cards. We can definitely follow with you. What are the things that we missed and how we can actually monitor. Okay. So with that, I don't know if there's anything else. Georgette, you want to? Okay. So thank you. Definitely thank you for your time and definitely have a good evening and drive safely.